You've just met someone, maybe a first date, maybe a new friendship, maybe someone you've known for 20 minutes at a party. And within an hour, you know about their childhood trauma, their last relationship in forensic detail, their deepest insecurity, their biggest regret. You didn't ask. It just came in a rush, like a door swinging open before you even knocked, and something in the dynamic shifts, not because the information is wrong to share eventually, but because the speed of it creates a strange feeling, an intimacy that wasn't earned yet, a closeness that feels simultaneously too much and somehow hollow. Most people have been on one side of this. Some have been on both, and the instinct is usually to label it as awkward or intense or a red flag. But the psychology underneath it is more interesting than that, and more human than that, because oversharing at speed is almost never about carelessness. It's almost always about something the person needs very badly and hasn't found a slower way to get. First, a distinction worth making. Oversharing isn't just sharing a lot. Some people are naturally open, warm, and communicative. That's not what this is about. Oversharing in the way this video means it is the rapid disclosure of highly personal, emotionally loaded information to someone you barely know in a way that skips the natural pace of building trust. It's not the content alone that defines it. It's the timing, the intensity relative to how much relationship actually exists yet. And the key word is yet, because the information shared isn't necessarily inappropriate forever. It's just being offered before the foundation exists to hold it. Before there's any mutual history, any established safety, any sense of whether this person is someone worth that level of vulnerability. The speed is the tell. It's what points to something happening beneath the surface. At the core of most oversharing is a need that is completely understandable. The need to be known, really known, not the surface version of yourself that most social interaction asks for, but the actual interior version, with its complications, its history, its weight. For some people, that need is particularly acute. Maybe they've spent a long time feeling unseen. Maybe their relationships have been shallow, or their emotional life has gone unacknowledged for long enough that the pressure builds. Maybe they're going through something isolating and the longing for genuine connection has reached a point where it overwhelms the usual social pacing. When that hunger is strong enough, it bypasses the normal sequence. Normally, intimacy builds incrementally. You share something small, the other person responds, trust accumulates, and gradually the depth increases. It's slow. It requires patience. And for someone who is emotionally starved for real connection, that pace can feel unbearable. So they skip it. They go straight to the depth they're hoping for and offer the kind of disclosure that usually takes months to arrive at on the first meeting. It's an attempt to shortcut to the feeling of being known. What it often produces instead is the opposite, a dynamic that feels unbalanced and a connection that doesn't deepen because the foundation was never built. Not all oversharing comes from hunger. Some of it comes from anxiety. And anxiety expresses itself in the opposite way you might expect. For some people, social situations, especially new ones, produce a kind of nervous energy that needs somewhere to go. Silence feels threatening. Pauses feel like rejection waiting to happen. The pressure to fill space, to be interesting, to hold someone's attention can become so intense that the person reaches for the most compelling material they have. And the most compelling material is usually personal. There's also a specific anxiety about being liked that drives this. If you can't trust that someone will like the normal version of you, you might reach for something that feels more guaranteed to create connection. Vulnerability, when it lands, creates warmth. It signals trust. It invites reciprocity. For someone anxious about whether they're making a good impression, dropping something personal early can feel like a strategy, a way to manufacture closeness before the other person has had time to decide they're not interested. Irony is that the anxiety about connection is what disrupts the connection. But anxiety rarely operates with that kind of self-awareness in the moment. For some people, the pattern goes deeper than a single interaction. It connects to how they learn to relate to others from early on, people with anxious attachment styles. And this isn't a label so much as a description of a learned way of operating, often struggle with the gradual pace of building trust. Waiting feels dangerous. Uncertainty about how someone feels about you feels intolerable, so there's a drive to accelerate, to establish closeness quickly, to get to the point of mutual knowing before the ambiguity can spiral. Oversharing can be part of that acceleration. If I tell you something real and you respond warmly, I have information. I know you're safe. I know this is going somewhere. The wait is over. There's also sometimes an implicit test in it, not a conscious one, but a felt one. If I show you the difficult parts of me early and you stay, then I know you're not just here for the easy version. It's a way of screening for genuine acceptance before the investment gets too deep, which sounds rational on paper. In practice, it tends to overwhelm people who are still in the stage of deciding whether they even want to be friends. There's a version of oversharing that looks like vulnerability, but functions differently, where the personal disclosure isn't really an invitation to genuine connection. It's a performance of openness designed to produce a specific reaction. This can be subtle and it often isn't fully conscious. But some people have learned that sharing pain, difficulty, or trauma generates sympathy, attention, and closeness fast. It works. People lean in, they offer warmth, they feel trusted. And for someone who has found that normal social exchange doesn't get them the connection they need, this becomes a reliable shortcut. The issue is that what gets generated isn't quite intimacy. It's a kind of performed intimacy, warm on the surface but not built on mutual knowledge or accumulated trust, and it tends not to last. The other person eventually realizes the pattern. The connection stays shallow despite the apparent depth of what was shared. This version of oversharing often frustrates the person doing it too, even if they can't identify why. They keep making connections that feel close and then fizzle. They can't understand why being so open doesn't produce the sustained closeness they are after. The answer usually is that the openness was deployed rather than offered, and people, even when they can't articulate it, feel the difference. It's worth naming this directly, because the experience of being overshared at is genuinely complicated and the way people typically respond to it isn't always kind. The most common reaction is discomfort followed by quiet retreat. The person backs away without explaining why. They don't respond to the disclosure with matching depth. They become polite in that particular way that signals they're managing their distance. And the person who overshared is left with the information that something went wrong, but often not a clear sense of what. This is painful, and it reinforces a difficult loop. The person overshared because they needed connection. The oversharing pushed the other person back. That rejection increases the emotional need, which makes the next attempt more urgent, which makes the next overshare more intense. Understanding this loop doesn't mean the person on the receiving end has an obligation to absorb more than they're comfortable with. Boundaries in those situations are reasonable, but it does mean the behavior is better understood as a signal of need than as a flaw of character. The person wasn't being careless with you, they were being careless with themselves. Here's what oversharing at speed really reveals. It reveals a person who wants connection badly enough to risk getting it wrong. Someone whose need for genuine closeness has outpaced their sense of how to build it safely. Someone who has, often for understandable reasons, come to associate speed with sincerity. As if going slow means not really caring, the behavior looks like too much. But underneath it is usually a very simple thing. A person who wants to be known and hasn't quite learned how to let that happen at a pace that other people can actually meet. Real intimacy isn't built by the amount you disclose. It's built by the accumulation of small moments of trust over time. Disclosure is part of that eventually, but the depth of what you share has to follow the depth of what has been established, not preceded. For people who recognize this pattern in themselves, the question isn't how to share less. It's how to get more comfortable with the slower pace of genuine connection, with the uncertainty of not knowing yet, with trusting that who you are revealed gradually is enough. It usually is.